My name is Rudy Page, and many moons ago I was the sales and marketing manager of Dyke Dryden. All of the relationships between all the big brands, so I handled those, and then was responsible for the distribution around the UK and developing the relationships with the salons, the retailers, and then also I was responsible for coordinating the original Afro hair and beauty exhibition in 1983 at the Grosvenor House. And at the time, it was the pivotal show for the industry.
So I'm Derek Clement, Afro hair stylist. I'd like to say a stylist and coach, educator. So I've been doing Afro hair for quite a while, since 1976. I started as an apprentice in London, Mayfair. That was with Splinters International. A massive shop in those days. Lots of young black boys and girls were trained there, and we grew into, if you like, prominent hairdressers.
So Dyke Dryden, what they really did with the strength that they had in up to the 1980s, they really pulled the industry together in terms of Caribbean business people. The impact that they had was, at one time, Dyke Dryden was the largest provider of trade credit to Caribbean-owned businesses in the UK. And that was another reason that they're such a pivotal and important force for the industry.
Good afternoon, welcome. My name is Paul Boateng, and I am a governor of the Museum of London. And we welcome you to this important occasion. It's part of our Talking Point series, and leading up to the opening of a new museum on our new site in Smithfield Market. But as part and parcel of that process, which is going to take a number of years, we're fulfilling the mission of the Museum of London, which is to reflect London's history, the people of London. And in that, there's nothing more significant, is there, actually, than that is closest to us all, our hair. Those of us who still have some are clinging onto it. And Francis Grew, who's our curator, actually let's give him a round of applause. Francis had the inspiring idea, as part and parcel of Talking Points, of reaching out and looking at the story behind the products of Dyke Dryden. Now, very many of us grew up with Dyke Dryden. They were the producers of black hair products throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they left a tremendous legacy. And Francis began with those products. You'll see those products, but then saw those products as leading into a story of London. And we've got two people today in particular, Rudy Page and Derek Clement, who are really in a position to help us share that story, to relive it for some of us, and to introduce it to us for those who haven't actually lived it, and for whom this is a new and novel experience, because museums need to be exciting museums need to be places that, yes, tell of our past, but relate it to our present and lead us to the future. And actually, hair does just that. I'm of a generation, the generation of '68, when the defining musical of the period was called Hair. And for any of you who remember that, and I'm sure we've got the posters somewhere in our archive in the museum, Marsha Hunt's hair dominated that poster, dominated the show, and Marsha was one of us. And at that time in particular, when in many ways the black community was under siege, hair was just very important. It was important that our hair looked good. It was important that our hair said something about us, our pride in ourselves, in our culture, our pride in where we were, but also, and importantly, where we were going. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Rudy Page, who's going to come up now onto the stage. And is just going to talk with me and with all of us about that period. We're going to be in conversation before we get into the panels which will explore in a bit more detail this whole phenomenon of black hair products. Rudy, let's sit down.
Great to be here.
So, tell us, I mean, you were, well, there are pictures of you. You were young, you were slim. You're not so young, but you're slim, and you had lots of hair. I mean, I remember you as a bright, young, prideful entrepreneur. So tell us about Dyke Dryden in those times.
So Dyke Dryden. So I joined them when I was about 22. So that's 1981. Seems a lot. It's interesting to meet so many people who weren't alive in those days. But it was a great time in terms of Dyke Dryden because it was almost unheard of for a black business of that size to be employing young people, particularly in the role of sales and marketing, and then to be so close to entrepreneurs who really had to go out and battle every day, serve customers and make best use of the resources they had. So they were just a great example to.
And where did Dyke Dryden begin?
So they really began as a company, 1965, West Green Road in Tottenham. In fact, my office used to be on 93 West Green Road. And of course, in those days, in the 60s into the 70s, West Green Road in Tottenham was quite, they had a lot of barber shops, record shops. So Dyke Dryden were heavily involved in beauty pageants. They sold music as well, and they were promoters. And it was only a bit later on, around about 1965, there used to be a woman called Elsa Robinson, who said, look guys, forget about these beauty pageants, hair products, women, that's where the business will be in the future. And so she was really important for getting them to get into the hair products business.
Now, talk to us about barber shops, because I mean, I can remember, I mean, I was born in Hackney. We lived for my very couple of years, 2-3 years, in Tottenham. But then I went to the Gold Coast, to Ghana. I was there until my mid to late teens. And so when I came back, we lived in a place called Hemel Hempstead. And in Hemel Hempstead, there were no black barber shops. So one of the first things I had to do was to find a barbershop, because they treated my hair as if they were shearing a sheep.
Yeah.
So they'd just go, so I said no. You know, I was a teenager. I wanted to get out there. I wanted to date girls. I wanted to do all that stuff. So I went to look for a barbershop, and I found one on the Harrow Road. I got a train from Hemel into Euston, took a number 18 bus, went straight up until I saw black people. Which was in Brent. I got off the bus and I found a barbershop. But so tell us about barbershops then.
Yeah, again, barbershops were important because actually, when I think back before the barbershops, so I was born in London. My early years were in Finsbury Park. So I can remember, and those of you who kind of know those big houses in Finsbury Park, where we used to live, Medina Road and Tollington Park. And I remember going to people's house and sitting out in the backyard waiting to, to get our hair cut. But then talking about the barber shops which for me is really like the 80s, again, they were so important in terms of the community and seeing the elder men getting their hair cut. Again, it was important to the community because it was a socially safe gathering place. And of course, you could look at all the styles because the guys were very slick. And of course, in those days, most Caribbean people got tailor-made trousers and tailor-made suits. Shepherd's Bush was the place where you went to get your trousers cut.
Yeah.
So the barber again represented an important part of the style and fashion at the time. It really was important.
And I mean, my memory. Who here remembers Desmond's? See, Desmond's was really the first TV show that really respected black people and black people's experience. You had some great actors in that, you remember?
Yeah, and what was great about Norman Beaton, but also you saw that the challenge between the intergenerational relationships, and of course with Desmond, it normalized Caribbean people in this country because the media at the time was always pushing to dehumanize, whereas Desmond's in its way normalized.
Yeah. And the relationship also between Caribbean people and African people. Because remember Christopher Santi?
Yeah, of course.
Great. I was so fond of Christopher. It was but that said something about the role of the barber shop in our lives. Yeah. But of course, tell us about how the industry grew, because of course it grew from that sort of what I would call local barbershops in Tottenham, in Brent. You remember Mr. Archery and Kensal Rise? Yes. I mean, it grew from that into something else that took us to Maddox Street. So tell us about the journey.
So we're now talking about meeting the needs of women, the hairdressers, the salons, and particularly in the 1980s where the curly perm products, and then Derek will talk a bit more about it later on, is that even if you had natural hair, there were so many products around moisturizing the hair. So the hair started to appear to grow much more. So by the time we got to the 1980s and the curly perm and relaxer hairstyles, and then also the influence of the USA. So when you think of all the styles in Black America, it was very powerful. And those companies at the time had a lot of money. And that kind of style was what we wanted because we were influenced by the films, Shaft, all those kind of films that we used to watch, and just looking at those styles, and Ebony magazine. Yeah. So all of these were really powerful in terms of, and of course, we were at a time where we wanted to dress to impress, and it was about cultural esteem. So it was a new generation of young people coming up, probably no different today, whose ideas about style were different to our parents' generation.
Well, Derek's going to tell us more about the products themselves, but you give us a sense of the struggle for a black entrepreneur at that time.
Yeah, it's really difficult, and Dyke Dryden, because of their size, the size of the company at the time, in a sense, tells you how difficult it is, or was. So at the time, Dyke Dryden was the largest provider of trade credit to black businesses in this country at the time.
Because they couldn't get money from the banks.
Yeah, and there was no way would the other wholesalers give credit to a black business. So a salon, if they didn't have the money, and a lot of the times cash, when their goods were delivered, then their goods would be taken back, regardless of how many people might be waiting. And then the other point that really symbolizes at the time, or symbolic of the time, when Dyke Dryden hit their first £1 million turnover, they were still unable to get a bank overdraft for £5,000. So can you imagine any business even today, if you had £1 million turnover and not being able to get an overdraft for £5,000? So can you imagine all the other businesses, all the smaller entrepreneurs, the challenges that they had?
And those challenges were on a number of fronts. I mean, Mr. Archery in Kensal Rise was constantly being raided. Because essentially there were too many black people hanging around Kensal Rise. So, I mean, I remember a case where I was one of the defense lawyers. 15 young black guys picked up outside Mr. Archery's in Kensal Rise. And then they tried to drag him into some sort of conspiracy too. So it was tough. Maddox Street, where Splinters were.
So if you talk about getting to Maddox Street, so what was great about Splinters, it was at the top of the market, and thousands of young people, Derek Clement being one of the first in terms of proteges, thousands of young people actually got their experience and training there and went on to become entrepreneurs. But again, they stood out against a massive amount of forces, and Winston Isaacs, I mean, it's a pity we didn't pay much more tribute to his contribution to the industry, even though we're doing that now. But it was immense. But not only that, there was other people around. So you had Lorna and George Sinclair. They were also
Marble Arch, remember?
Marble Arch, yeah. And then they were also in Shepherd's Bush. Then you also had Carmen England. And in fact, you'll see further down the avenue there, a video of Carmen England demonstrating her Carmen rollers in 1948. So she actually had a salon in Piccadilly. There's a little arcade just before you get to Piccadilly called the Burlington Arcade. Some of you will probably know. So she had a shop in there, and I met her about 1981, 1982. So she actually invented the Carmen rollers. But for legal reasons, she was never able to claim or get any of the profits from it.
So the story of hair is our story.
Yeah.
The context is one of struggle.
Yeah.
Because don't forget, there were black young people who were picked up for sus in Oxford Circus Tube, just around the corner from Maddox Street, picked up for sus in Shepherd's Bush, loitering with suspicion to commit an arrestable offence. Yeah. And I remember having to call employers who, when these young people were working in Oxford Street, picked up on their way to or from work. You had to call the employer to explain why they were in the Oxford Street area. So imagine the courage of opening up a top-class saloon in Maddox Street, whose main clientele was black people. I mean, that took courage. So I think really we want just to give a round of applause, don't we, to Rudy, to Derek, to all those pioneers. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. And as we used to say in those times, respect. Respect.
Respect is due.
Good. Great.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this HairEx Live. And this is a collaboration between Derek Clement, who you're going to hear a lot from a bit later on, and myself. And I'm extremely happy to see so many family members. So I know there's family members from the Dyke Dryden family who'll be here, and including my own family as well. So we'll hear more from those a bit later on. So HairEx now. HairEx is a unique heritage, kinship, and legacy platform. And when Derek and myself co-founded this idea of Afro Hair and Beauty 1983, Legends, Pioneers, and Veterans, we thought it was important to recognize, celebrate, and share the significant contribution of Dyke Dryden and Splinters International. So I was the sales and marketing manager of Dyke Dryden and was responsible for the original Afro Hair and Beauty. So I came up with those three words, Afro Hair and Beauty, after winning a trip to Atlanta in 1982 and looked at the Bronner Brothers show and just looked at how the Americans sold products, and they linked music, fashion, selling, culture, cultural esteem, looking good, and it was all in one package. And at the end of the day, it was about doing business, and that's the model that we brought back to Grosvenor House. So you can imagine at the time, Grosvenor House Hotel, Park Lane. I remember going along to visit them for the first time with Mr. Dyke, and sat there in front of the gentleman. He asked us, what is the show that you want to put on here at Grosvenor House, Park Lane? And Mr. Dyke, and myself explained very carefully. And I remember the gentleman at the time, so we're talking about so that would be 1982. And the gentleman said, oh, that'll be, that's going to be a lot of money. And he said, oh, it's going to be about £30,000. So you can imagine in 1982, £30,000 was quite a lot of money. And it's still a lot of money now. So you can imagine in 1982, and Mr. Dyke just kind of said, yeah, that's not a problem, and wrote the check. And I've always been so proud of that, to be sitting next to a black businessman. Sits there, 30,000, it's not a problem.
Good afternoon. Rudy, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Francis and his crew over there in black. Did a fantastic job. Rudy pretty much has said everything, basically. So this is my executive partner. I'm creative partner. I'm the creative man. So my job is to talk about Afro hair and perhaps shed light on Winston Isaacs, because he talked about Dyke Dryden. So those were pioneers of the time. So as a young man, visualize a young man in 1976, young black guy, racism was rampant, and Paul mentioned sauce, which I'd forgotten about. I'll tell you a story about Paul and I later on, because I used to do his hair back in the day. And Marsha Hunt, those two things struck a chord with me. So here I was, a young black man looking for a job, couldn't quite fathom what I should do. Either got work in the post office, airport, banks, and I thought, no, it doesn't make sense, because if school's racist, why am I going to work back in the system? There's no way I'm going to rise to the top to meet my potential. So I remember saying to my barber, I said, in Acton back in the day, 1976 it was, said to my barber, John, can you train me to be a hairdresser, a barber? He says, so in the corner of the barber shop, his partner, Miss Olive, sort of very buxom Jamaican lady at the time, said to me, Derek, why did you go to the West End? It so happened, weeks later, my girlfriend went to Splinters. So remember, in those days, Splinters was one of those aspiring places you went to as a young black person. It was in the West End. Can you imagine? Guys, just visualize Mayfair in 1976. The shop was in 71. Just visualize a black shop amongst the big grandiose shops, Liberties, Harrods, Bond Street. There's a black man that had the vision to open a salon in the West End of London in those days. That's phenomenal. Winston. So guys, whenever I'm called to make little speeches or talks and soirees and seminars, I always like to mention Winston Isaacs, the founder, pioneer of Afro hairdressing in England, at least from an aesthetic point of view. There are lots of salons, but Winston took Afro hair to the next level. Right, so there I was, a young black man, 76, went to the salon with my girlfriend. She was much older than I was, and I sat there. And in this salon in the West End, I'm waiting for my girlfriend. And all I could see then was wealthy black people. I didn't think these people existed. I mean, I'm from South Acton in the estates. I'm from the estates, from the hood, so to speak. And here I am in Mayfair. And I remember seeing guys like sort of white singers and white actors and popping into the salon with their girlfriends. I remember a guy called, remember the guy, was it David Bowie? Yeah. All of these guys were coming to the salon. Yeah. Anyway, long story short. So there I was. African kings and queens, there were lots of lawyers, there were politicians, there were doctors, all the black elite, so to speak. Teddy Pendergrass, Marvin Gaye, Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, the 3 Degrees. I could go on and on and on. Patti Boulay. All these people went to the salon. I didn't believe this place existed. So I said to the man, which was Winston Isaacs, will you train me? He said to me, yeah, start next day. Those were the good days, wasn't it? Just start the next day. So I started. The rest is history. I started washing hair at the shampoo basin, and I worked my way up to become the artistic director. In 5 years, I became artistic director. You know, as Rudy says, nothing is new. We've always had black businesses around. And bear in mind, in those days, around London, as well as Splinters, you had similar black businesses on the outskirts. North London, South London, Shepherd's Bush, Hackney, Harlesden. Big names, Joan Sarms in North London. You had a guy called George Sinclair in Shepherd's Bush. You had, loads of names doing the same thing at the time. So the black hair was at its zenith in those days. I think Afro hair was at its peak, and people were making money. I worked so hard back in the day that Winston partner was very crafty. They set me a target. They said, Derek, if you could make however much it was at the time, then you'll get your big fat bonus. And they didn't believe I'd make the target, so I made the target. And the woman says, we can't give it to you. This guy worked so hard. And I remember Winston saying to his partner, give the boy his money. And of course, I bought my house at 24 years of age. 24 years of age, I had the audacity to go into Harrow. Harrow, Mock Shudo, 24 years of age, bought my house because of hairdressing.
Okay, hi everyone. My name's Crystal and I will be leading our panel today. I'm really excited to speak to our speakers. So this first panel will be about the original Afro Hair and Beauty Show in 1983, and we will also have a second discussion later on, so please do join us for that. It will be about the social impact of Afro Hair and Beauty in London. So to start with, please would you introduce yourselves?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dorothy Orty. Thank you.
I'm Derek Clement.
My name is Rudy Page.
Thank you. So what has been your involvement in Afro Hair and Beauty?
So I was the host of the first 3 Afro Hairs and Beauty, and also I modelled in a couple of the shows as well. So that was my involvement.
Thank you.
Right, so, well, of course, Splinters being what it was back in the day, we were perhaps the biggest black salon ever from an artistic point of view. And back again, I want to thank my brother. Enoch Williams was a pioneer. I used to go to his shop many, many times and just stand there and talk with him. Of course, Mr. Enoch was a legend of the time. So my contribution was really doing hair and adding, if you like, the aesthetics, the styles to black hair and beauty.
Great, thank you.
And in fact, at Splinters, we had a lot of the technicians for the different hair companies. A lot of them actually worked for Splinters, and that was the connection. And at the time as well, so Splinters was the largest client in terms of salons in the country for Dyke Dryden. So my claim to fame, so I originated those 3 words, Afro Hair and Beauty, and of course coordinated the original show. And as I mentioned, having won a trip to Atlanta in 1982, and in fact, I didn't even have a passport at the time, actually. I said, Mr. Dyke said, we're sending you to Atlanta. And I said, well, I haven't got a passport. So he said, well, go and get one then. And that was it. You know the Caribbean way, we'll go and get one then. So, yeah, so that's my, and then what I've done is, over the years, ensured that it was well understood where Afro Hair and Beauty came from and who was behind it, because in later years, which is still a bit of a sensitive issue, it was sold on. But it's still an important part of the industry, which we, from a legacy point of view, made sure that, you know, it's still remembered where it came from, its birth.
I think what's important to bear in mind is that at the time, we had no black events at that caliber. And we had white events, which was hair salon. So salon was the white version, and Afro Hair and Beauty was the black version. So we had to have our own platform back in the day, and that was the platform. And all the artists got together. All the best hairdressers all got together in those days. Right.
Great, thank you. Could you tell us about the journey of Afro Hair and Beauty 83 to today?
And that's actually a good question. So HairEx, at the time, so the original HairEx was in 1986, and that was designed because what I looked at, I could see that we had developed an exhibition. We had all the technicians there, but it was exhibition based. So what we wanted was a much more creative, the hairstylist taking the lead, followed by the fashion the cutting styles. And this is where Mr. Alex, and in fact, Jackie Lilly, Mr. Alex's husband, and she'll be speaking later. Sorry. Mr. Alex's wife. Sorry, Jackie. No, his wife will be speaking a bit later about, Alex Lilly. So at the time, so do you remember Mr. Alex in Brixton? Yeah, upstairs? Yeah, okay. So Ben at the time, as we called him, he was, again, one of the most creative hairdressers, and he led the activities for HairEx, and that was at the Kensington Town Hall. And we had 800 hairdressers there. It's probably still the largest in the 80s to actually have 800 hairdressers in one show. And then in 1988, we did HairEx 88, and that was at the Astoria Theatre. And do you remember the Astoria Theatre before they turned it into Tottenham Court Road Tube Station? Right opposite the Dominion Theatre. So at the time, so do you remember Black Heroes in the Hall of Fame? Yeah? So that was running at the time. So at the time, so Black Heroes at the Hall of Fame, there was a lot of hairdressing input in there. So Aquarius Salon, Finsbury Park. So Aquarius, they were really the main hairdressers for that show. So what I was aiming for with HairEx 88 then was that I wanted us to actually almost start to become almost like a musical. So the idea was that I said, well, we should have a hair show in the West End, which is creative, has themes, but it's in a theatre. And we should be able to go and sit down in the theatre and watch a hair show and see all those talented artists. So that was the thinking about HairEx 88. So again, so it was moving, and so that was the journey from the original Afro hair and beauty with stands and stalls and technicians selling the wares, to the point where it was about creativity, and it was creative-led, the music, the style, the fashion. Yeah.
Very good point, Rudy. I mean, Afro hair is going through a wonderful change, and as a result, because of the natural movement, you see lots of homemade products.
Yeah.
We have our own product. It's called Share Moist, which is amazing, because back in the day, we had to rely on the Americans. So alongside Afro hair, I think the black community in Britain are changing. So we are like the Americans 50 years ago. Just visualize America with sort of Soul Train, visualize America with the R&B movement.
Yeah.
They did lots of wonderful things. Now today in London, black Brits are doing amazing stuff. And the hair is part of that movement. It's a fantastic movement. And it's good to see so many young black brands. Really talked about chemistry. There are so many black trichologists in London right now. In fact, we have a member of the team here today, Lorna Jones.
So where's Lorna?
Where's Lorna, by the way? There
Jones?
she is. Let's give a hand to Lorna.
Where is she?
Lorna,
okay, she's there.
Yeah, Lorna's
trichologist.
here. Yes. So there are lots of black trichologists
Yeah.
and of course, as you know, trichology is a study of the hair, right? So, and these trichologists have their own product line. So London is like America now. It's just buzzing with information and buzzing with entrepreneurs. It's a fantastic time to be black and in Britain.
Great, thank you. Can you talk a bit about the impact of that first Afro hair and beauty show and how it changed from now, and all of our new Afro hair and beauty shows like HairEx and all of the smaller ones? What are the impacts of that?
If we talk about impact, and in effect, Paul mentioned it as well, is what you have to think about in the 1983, well, even like I said at the beginning, going back to 1982, two black men, or one youngster and a man, going into the Grosvenor House in Park Lane and say that we want to put on a black hair show here in the Grosvenor House. So that was a major impact in terms of what was going on in our community at the time, in the context of the early 1980s. And Paul made the point, and then Derek from personal experience, that at those times, young black men who were on their lunch hour used to be getting arrested for being in the West End, even though they had a suit and tie on. And all the shows that we used to do at the time, the fashion shows, there was always this theme of dress to impress. So the fact that we could have such a major show, completely sold out, no trouble, in the West End, just to be in the West End, that was a significant impact on the psyche of the young people at the time who were in the industry as well. And it attracted a lot of the talent as well. So a lot of the most sort of entrepreneurial people like Derek and myself, risk takers, it was perfect for us just because of, and there was a lot of money as well. And young people, we always need money. I'm so pleased that we've actually got a member of the Dyke and Dryden family, Sharon, who's going to come up and say a few words. Come on, Sharon. But come up. She's going to give you that live testimony. You know that old saying when you say, I knew those men, or I knew those people, I knew those women, those pioneers. So Sharon's going to just say a few words. And also, as important, a former staff member, Dyke and Dryden, called Paulette Greer. And she's going to come and say a few words, just very quickly, just going to stand here. And in fact, you'll see her just on that video clip in there, and also one of the pictures, young Paulette Greer. Right? I'm being cheeky, right. So Sharon and Paulette. So Sharon Dyke Mills. Right, and Paulette Greer. So, and again, Paulette has got the family connection. Her sister Jackie's there, and they'll give you some insight in terms of the impact of Dyke and Dryden and their legacy.
Are you going to ask me questions?
You can say a few words first.
Oh, thank you. Oh, first and foremost, thank you for setting this beautiful exhibition in such a lovely, lovely place, and thank you all for coming. Dyke and Dryden goes back to the 60s. It didn't just start in the 80s, it started in the 60s with both Len and Dudley Dryden meeting in 65, deciding that they didn't want to do mainstream jobs, which would have been at the time on a railway, electrician, I think I need to stay. I need to turn around, don't I? Electrician. Do I need to go on the stage at all?
Come on if you want.
Oh, as long as I don't fall off the stage.
Have a seat. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Oh, look, I've got a purple.
See, once again, Derek's giving up his seat. He's such a gentleman.
Yes, as mentioned before, when they came over from, well, they both came over from Jamaica, not together, but they met up in the early 60s, decided that your normal mainstream jobs, electrician, I've got the name of it with the do-ward.
But I think, Sharon, because we kind of went through that this morning.
Did we? Sorry, I wasn't here because I was stuck in traffic.
I think a key thing that would be nice for the audience to hear, and you've said it before previously, in terms of yourself and your brother and how you used to label the products and things like that so that they could be sold.
Every single holiday.
This is Saturday work for young people now.
Every single holiday without fail. Len, Sharon, you're coming to work. And it was spent at 43 West Green Road. I'm not sure if you're familiar with West Green Road, but it's in Tottenham. It's near the Tottenham Stadium. And it was, we used to actually have the castor oil would come into a large drum, and the coconut oil would come in a large drum, and it was liquefied. So we'd have to actually spend time. Castor oil is quite thick. So to fill one bottle of castor oil takes about a good 2 or 3 minutes. We absolutely hated it. Had to bottle them up, put the labels on, put them in the boxes. But you know what? That is what's brought me and us all here today, by the simple labeling of a bottle and the heart-wrenching work they had to do during the holidays, which I absolutely hated. But I know that I'm blessed, because without that, we wouldn't be here. And I'm thankful.
Well, I've known my uncle for all my life, and it's not just for hairdressing, but he was a pillar for the community. So He didn't start off with hair products. He started off as the first black person to have a record shop in the UK. And it started from there. And then because black people couldn't get products for their hair, that's how the hair products came in. And then they decided to manufacture as well as produce hair products. And that's how it started. But they were always for the community as well. They did a lot for the community. Mr. Dryden, he covered the East End, and there wasn't anything that they wouldn't do for their black people, and the same with Mr. Dyke. Now, Mr. Dyke was asked to be a judge, and not a lot of people know that. He was asked to be a judge, and he said he refused because he wanted to help his own people better the way that he was doing. And that's the sort of people they were. I mean, the amount of times that they wanted to close down Wrigley Market, not on Mr. Dyke or Dryden's watch. And now it seems like they've got their wish, because I think they're going to close it down anyway. But they did fight for that. And, it brought everyone together. And not only that, it's just that they broadened their horizons, because they used to do beauty pageants as well. And they brought in the products with the beauty pageants. And then came Afro, hair and beauty, which Rudy would have told you all about, because he came on board with that as well with us. And we did it out of love. And it grounded me, because I could reach the counter. I was in there selling records and hair products. But guess what? It started off as a travel agency. Everyone down Tottenham know Dyke Dryden Travel Agency. That's how it started. And, they dipped their fingers in everything, because they were part of the Windrush. Now, Mr. Dyke was an electrician. My dad was a carpenter. My dad's brother was an electrician, and my dad's other brother was a carpenter. And between them all, they could have formed that type of company. But no, they chose. Mr. Dyke Dryden chose to go down that route, and we're here to. They were the stepping stone. It's hard for the kids of today to do what they did. They did pave the way, but it's hard. But, their name should be out there in lights, because they were the stepping stone and the pillar of the whole community. And that's how strong we feel. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So how do you think changing trends in styling reflect the politics of Afro hair?
Derek loves that question.
No, I think Afro hair is, in my opinion, very political. And we now hear terms like texturism, terms like colorism. All these reflects the Afro hair industry. The point is, as far as I'm concerned, the Afro hair industry, the movement of the natural movement, in my opinion, is making a massive impact on people's lives. And of course, the empowerment aspect. People are empowered by virtue of their hair, the choice of style that they wear. And bear in mind, a few decades ago, you went to work and your hair wasn't, if you like, suitable or in people's minds it was. In their consciousness, they felt they had to have a certain texture, a certain type of style to somewhat fit into the corporate environment. Whereas today, that doesn't matter. So I think the Afro movement is making a marvelous impact on people's minds, consciousness, and political views.